getting ready to dive in. So I've got what feels like a possible idea. I've got my main character, Zach. I've got something Zach wants, to be with Melissa. I've got a situation where Zach is going to try and get what he wants, Marlon's party. I don't know much more than that at this point, other than I'm going to try and run with the beginning of Zach getting a phone call from Marlon about the party. So is this enough to dive in and try and write my story? Shouldn't I do a whole bunch of character development and world building before I get properly into it? Don't I need to know all the details before I can start so I don't get lost along the way? All valid questions, and my answer to all of them is the same. I don't know. I'm sorry. I know that might be annoying, but the truth of it is the only person who has any clue about what you should do next is you. Just like the ideas themselves, nobody can tell you there's a right way or a wrong way to carry out the process of writing a story. You have to decide and test what feels right. Do you like the idea of just diving in, knowing almost nothing and finding it as you go along? Would you prefer to build your world, flesh out your characters and think about your plot first? Both ways are fine. Both ways will move you forward. Both ways have their own ups and downs. If you dive right in and just start writing what you think happens, you'll feel the excitement of generating a story that didn't exist before you started, bringing people and places to life and feeling like you're meeting new friends and enemies and figuring things out. The downside to this way can be that you can reach a point where you start to feel like you're juggling too much information in your head and like you're lost in something that is sprawling all over the place rather than telling a cohesive story. On the flip side, if you start with a bunch of planning, you can get to know your characters beforehand, their ins and outs, their histories. You can develop the sense of the world your story will take place in, build details and scout imaginary locations for things to happen. You can also start to map out a rough idea of what you think is going to happen, where your story might be going. Maybe visualize a few important scenes and maybe even an ending. All this can feel amazing, like you're a proper writer and you've assembled all the blocks to sit down and build your perfect story. The downside to this way can be that you end up exhausting your excitement for the characters and world. You overdo it to the point where you feel bogged down with so much detail and certainty that feels like there's no real need or desire to tell a story at all. There's strengths and risks in either way. Which one feels right to you? There is another way though. To try this other way, you have to abandon the idea that it's either about planning or not planning, that you only have two choices, and they're either plot every single detail out before you start, or just stagger off blindly into the mist of your unknown story and pray that you find it. It's a big, messy mix-up of both. I've written a bunch of stories now. Sometimes I start and feel in a way more planny type of mood. I build characters, I describe places, I flesh out details, I think about possible plot and scenes, etc. Other times, all I start with is a line. I don't want to go. Or a detail, a foot sticking out from under a duvet, and I just start writing, trying to find a character and see what happens. Different stories have different feelings and flavours, and they kind of decide how the story wants to grow. If the story feels like it'd be very intricate with twists and turns and logistical information built in, you're going to need more planning. Just for yourself, not to get lost, but you have to make sure you allow yourself some bits where you can just play with possibilities to allow for the magic of discovery. For example, you know your character has a fight at some point. Somebody's going to try and stop them getting what they want and there's no avoiding the confrontation. You also know that the fight will be a chance for your character to surprise us and themselves with what they're capable of. You don't know who, with, where or how it will play out. So you just write one and see. Maybe it feels okay, but something feels off. Maybe it's the wrong location or the wrong opponent, so you change those things and write it again. This time as you write it, one of the characters says something you didn't expect them to. A line popped into your head that wasn't on your plan or in your notes that sheds new light on their relationship and the story. This new discovery changes the course of your story. You can now make new plans, glowing from your new discovery. That makes sense, right? What I'm saying is, whichever way I start, I always end up incorporating some of the other. If I start with planning, I make sure that I write some unplanned scenes as I go. Dialogues between characters, bits of action. If I start wandering without a plan, I make sure that I sprinkle in ideas about where I might be headed along the way. Let's apply it to my idea about Zach. So Zach is on his knees, right? Fishing around in the sofa for his phone. Let's say he manages to get to the phone in time to answer it and it is Marlon. Without planning, I could just have a go at writing that conversation and learning about them both through how they talk to each other. When it comes to dialogue and characters talking, I like to speak it out and imagine a real conversation. Like, yeah? What took you so long to answer? What took you so long to call? I've been waiting all day. Relax, you relax. Did you find out? Is she coming? You know, you should really meditate. It would help with your blood pressure. Marlon! You get the idea. A simple conversation, but now I know a bunch of new stuff. I know that they're old friends. The familiar tone that came out, they must have known each other a good while, maybe even since the infants. I'm also getting a teenage feeling, like 16, 17 years old maybe. They sound like I sounded at that age. It's also clear that Marlon likes winding Zach up. Wind up, old friends. He knows how Zach feels about Melissa and is playing with him. Just through a simple dialogue exercise, I have a sense of the dynamic of their friendship bond. This is important because it might be a bond that is tested during the course of the story. I didn't plan it, but it moved me forward. So what's next? Well, now I feel like I want to know some more stuff, some facts. So I need to ask some questions and plan a little bit. Where's Marlon's house? How far is it from Zach's? How will Zach be getting there? What time? Is he planning to stop over? Who else will be there? Are they planning to drink? Drugs? How old are they exactly? With that little bit of planning, I'm armed to write some more and make more discoveries. You don't need to know the answer to every question when you start. You just need to know enough to feel ready. And if you dive in and start to feel like you're not ready to go on, that's completely fine. It's your story. Nobody else is going to write it. Take a minute, have a think, make a sandwich, write some notes and try planning a bit until you feel ready to dive back in. Because soon enough, your story will be taking shape, and that's when it starts asking you questions. And those questions need answers.